The Prince and Princess of Wales, I totally understand why they have got Forest Lodge. Personally, I understand that they're moving their family out to the countryside and it's going to be their forever home. But we're told that when he becomes king one day, William will not be living at Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle. What does it mean for these two old, huge, iconic institutions not to possibly have the monarch living there for the first time in hundreds of years?
Well, first of all, great scoop. Getting the story about Forest Lodge that you got in the Sun. Look, I think it's to be expected with William. He said he wants to be a king with royalty with a small r. Part of that, I think, is that he wants to be downsizing. It's not exactly a modest home in terms of the general public. In terms of a royal residence, it's fairly modest. It used to be a private secretary's house, so it's just slightly bigger than Adelaide Cottage. I think that what it means is it looks like he's going to be, when it is his turn, it's going to be looking to do things differently. I mean, both Balmoral, both Buckingham Palace, as well, it has been a home since Queen Victoria. It was built in the Hanoverian times, but it was built for Queen Victoria. I just think if you've got a young family, it's probably not necessarily suitable for them. I can see it still being the sort of central hub for the royal family, the trademark place where they have the banquets and things like that, and where staff are working. But I think it'll be open more to the public, similar to Windsor Castle could do the same thing. You only have to look at Versailles. Versailles is obviously they don't have a king, but it's one of the most popular tourist attractions in France. But when they want to have a state banquet, Macron has a big state banquet at Versailles, so it can be done, and it'll probably be more cost effective. The only thing I would say is they've come up with this forever home before. They did it when the public had to spend a lot of money on Kensington Palace, Apartment 1A, and that was going to be their forever home. Still is one of their 3 homes. And of course, when Buckingham Palace was being renovated, Ailsa was there at the time. When they announced it, that it was definitely where the Queen would be living when it was finished. It's definitely where Charles would be living when it was finished. I think it was something like 373 million was going to be spent on it. That's going to escalate to over 500 million. Well, that's a lot of public money spent on what effectively could end up being a museum.
Ailsa, you for many years you worked inside Buckingham Palace, so you know the corridors and the function rooms very, very well. Would it lose? I mean, I'm just saying, I totally understand why William wants to bring up his family in the countryside in Windsor Great Park, and I totally understand from his background why he wants his family to be brought out there. You feel free to disagree, but that's the way I stand on it. But Buckingham Palace not having the monarch living there, could it lose its lustre? I mean, tourists, people know Buckingham Palace. They want to walk past and think, wow, is the king or queen in there today?
Absolutely. And it was well known that the late Queen did not particularly like living in Buckingham Palace. It wasn't her favourite. But as ever, she put duty before self. And she stayed there, a good proportion of the year. And you're right, it does have that cachet. Trooping the colour comes in and out of Buckingham Palace, changing of the guard every day. The tourists like seeing their monarch inside the palace. So I do think it would be hugely regrettable if William and Catherine don't live there when they're monarch.
Well, but the king at the moment, effectively lives at Clarence House, and he uses it as the office, and that could still be the situation going forward. And I think that William will probably do things differently. I think there's a lot of properties under the royal, under Crown Estate. There are a lot of properties. We have Balmoral, we have Sandringham, which are privately owned. They could be opened up as museums as well. And I think that he will downsize a lot. I think he'll not only downsize in terms of active properties, but in terms of the amount of people working within the monarchy as well. And I think that's going to be something that he's quite keen to do.
But you say he's going to downsize, and yet he's escalating at the moment, isn't he? This will be the 4th private property that he will have.
No, I think in terms of the amount of staff, the magic figure he's looking is well under 100. I think that's the direction of travel he's going, and I think a lot of people will probably see that as not a bad thing. Because it can be seen, and it is incredibly expensive. We've seen that the Royal Train is going. The Royal Yacht Britannia has gone. These things. This is the direction of travel, and I can understand why. But I do think that they would lose something if the monarch wasn't living there. However, if you look at the figures, if the palace was open more to the public, more money would be generated, and something like if you look at what is one of the biggest tourist attractions in Europe is Versailles, where it's 10 times the amount of people go to Versailles that they do at Buckingham Palace, and there's no monarch living there. So I think there's an argument to say that you can say Buckingham Palace was for the Victorian era through the whole of the Windsors to Elizabeth II, and really our current king hasn't lived there. And so it can easily be taken as a place where you have entertainment, garden parties, and the royals are active there. They don't necessarily have to live there.
So is the direction of travel, is the direction of travel modernisation then? Is William, we're a long way from William becoming king, obviously, but he's laid out that he intends to live there Forest Lodge when he becomes king. But is it William laying down a marker, expressing his kind of identity that he wants to modernise very slowly the monarchy?
I think you're absolutely right. I think everything he's doing as Prince of Wales is actually an indication of what he will be like as monarch. And it's sort of family first. It's protecting the interests of his 3 young children and his wife, who's been very, very unwell over the last 2 years. And currently, is it duty second? I don't know. But I think you're right. He's putting a line in the sand at the moment about what he's going to do as monarch going forward.
But as the late Queen used to say, you've got to be seen to be believed. Yeah. And the fact is you've got to be out active. And there has been criticism in the papers subsequent to your splash about the lack of jobs that he's doing. And compared to, say, the Princess Royal and even the King. I mean, the King, is still living with cancer and is very, very active. And it must be incredibly sapping for him. And the Princess Royal, I was at a function the other day where she became president, taking over from the Duke of Edinburgh as president of the In and Out Club. And there she was, turning up late at night, and then having dinner with the board of directors till about 11. She'd had a full and active day. It goes to the territory. And if you remember what she said in that interview with the Canadian television, is that be careful what you wish for, because if you start downsizing too much, your influence, your stretch, it becomes less, you're less connected with the people. People do turn out when they see, particularly people like, Sophie Wessex and the new Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Edward. They turn out in droves, and they like that connection. Yeah. And if you lose that connection, the monarchy actually loses something that it's about.
And also, it sort of feeds into the Republican ideal that why do we need a monarchy?
So I think you've got to be careful what you wish for. And I think that William has got to, whilst thinking he wants to change things the way every monarch can change things. There's nothing set in stone. But I think that when they usually get to take that role, then they're sitting in the chair or the throne, as you like, and they suddenly realise why their father or their grandmother or their great-grandfather did something, because it's a different perspective from that throne to when you're looking to see how I'm going to change it. So I think we'll wait and see.
And timing is everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
We could be, God willing, Charles could be king for another 10, 15 years. So I think, it depends on when.
Well, William's time will come, as you pointed out there. At the moment, he's very much focusing on, he's got a very young family. Yeah. Remember, Charles as king doesn't have a very young family that he has to, make sure he's at home when they get back from school, or he has the opportunity. That's what William enjoys. He enjoys the school run, and he wants to bring his children up in the countryside. His life is very different to what King Charles's is. I know the late Queen Elizabeth II, obviously, someone you worked very closely with. She worked extremely hard when she was bringing up her children, but that's what William perhaps is choosing not to do.
But it's a different era as well.
But he will end up, when he becomes king, having to, as you pointed out...
Just look at what Queen Elizabeth was doing right up until the end. Yeah. This is... I think that people, it's not really a question of choice. It's a question of duty. And I think that William has got to be quite careful when I was doing this balancing act, because I hadn't been, a dad, and your mum, Ailsa, when they're at a certain age, the kids, they do need you, and you've got to be around them, and you've got to, they're having their little tantrums and what have you. The reality is, it's a difficult time for Catherine and William, when they've got those 3 children, all at different ages coming through. And that is something you've got to consider. But at the same time, the role of monarch, as we've seen, is one where duty has to come first. And I don't think there's any way around that, unless you want to have a part-time monarch or a president. The reality is that is the job. And it's a job for life, and it's a job that's pretty relentless.